Community Church Indy, where the gospel is shared and lives are saved.
As a broadcast, however,
Hello. Doing great. How are you? Correct. Yes, it's 11:34. That is correct.
Okay. Can you hear us, Pastor Reynolds?
Yes, I can hear now.
Okay, great.
Looks like
So,
we're ready to go.
ready to go. Yeah. So, tell us about this bill, House Bill 49.
Well, House Bill 1134
34.
has
Thank you.
gone through a process, several stages and phases, and it has been amended in some very significant ways. But it is still a bill that is very dangerous. And at the end of the day, you have to look at the root of the bill, where it came from, what was the spirit of the bill from the beginning. Again, amendments have been made in the state of Indiana that no longer prohibit the teaching of Black history, which is American history in our country. But again, it originated really from an executive order put into place by President Trump. President Trump passed an executive order that no longer has any bearing on law, and no longer has any authority, because those executive orders made by one president can be overturned by another president. Thank God, in this instance for sure. But he passed an executive order making it illegal to teach Black history, which is a part of American history. He made it illegal to teach the ugly in our history. And there was made a connection by him and other extremists in his party between the teaching of American history and this term, critical race theory. Critical race theory is really a course that is taught in law schools that examines the history of race in America through the lenses of the law and how the law was used to help support slavery, to support Jim Crow and Black codes in our country. In essence, how the law was used, has been used historically to oppress people of African descent in our country. And so it's the examination of that from a legal standpoint. And lawyers, those preparing to be lawyers, take this course in law schools if they choose to do so. But this term has been attached to what is essentially the teaching of Black history in America. Not only has it been tied to the teaching of Black history in America, which again is American history, part of the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's also been attached to curriculum materials that we know to be social emotional learning curriculum that are designed to help people identify their emotions and manage their emotions in a way that helps individuals who are struggling mentally and emotionally to be more healthy. But it not only helps the individual, it helps the classroom, it helps the communities that those people live in. And so these bills that have been passing around the country are really, in some ways, have been picking up steam and momentum. But I'm grateful that here in Indiana, we've had such an organized and strategic outcry in opposition to the bill that the progress of the bill in many ways has been stalled. And at the very least, some significant amendments have been made. But when you look at the history of the bill, again, originating in hate, originating in fear, again, originating in Donald Trump's executive order, this is something that we cannot tolerate. We have to fight it with everything that we have in us. And so again, amendments have been made, but we still need to fight really that it not even be heard again and that it just goes away, like many bills that we've confronted in the past have done. For example, I'll add this, and then feel free to chime in. I don't know if you're receiving questions and comments from the public or not. But to date, 7 states have passed anti-critical race theory legislation. To date, there are 16 other states that are in the process of potentially passing anti-critical race theory legislation. And again, it is an oppressive legislation that takes us backwards, really erasing over 150 years of progress in our country. We have to know our history so that we don't repeat our history. And so this smells a lot to me like what happened after Reconstruction in the American South. After the Emancipation Proclamation, people of African descent in the South had all the rights that everybody else had. They could vote just like everybody else could vote. And many of our African American descendants, ancestors, were elected into office throughout the South. But once the Northern troops moved out of the South, the powers that be in the South stepped up and erased all of the progress that had been made through beginning to enact what we all know to be Jim Crow laws, again, that further oppressed our people in the South. It was the South's way of adjusting to there being no more slavery in America, but finding another way to oppress our people in different ways through Jim Crow legislation and many of the black codes. And so progress was made immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation, but all of that progress was erased. We were taking backwards, right? Like Trump's, again, call to make America great again, which we'd understand to be a call to take America backwards and to erase all of the progress that has been made. And so that's why it's so important for us to not only defeat this legislation here in the state of Indiana, we've got to be conscious about what's happening in states around our union and do what we can to help support other states to make sure that this doesn't go any further than it has already gone. And it's not successful in literally taking us backwards. If these people would have their way, we would at very least be looking at Jim Crow 2.0. Is what many people have called it. And it's a legitimate assessment of what this legislation seeks to do in oppressing, again, our people through education. Again, fundamental to the enslavement of our African ancestors was making it illegal for them to learn how to read, for them to be taught how to read. People were killed over being taught how to read because they recognize that we're not inferior at all. Because in fact, if we were inferior, there would be no need to prevent us from reading. But they knew and have always known that we're not inferior. And so the effort to limit our ability to be educated has been a very intentional tool to use to oppress us as a people. And we can't allow them to take us backwards.
I totally agree with that, Pastor Reynolds. I tell you what, man, this is going to be a challenge for us. And of course, by us standing together, working together in one cause, then that helps protect us. If we are not collaborating ourselves together, working together to make sure we get the word out, then honestly, it seems as though things are just going to continue to stay the same. What's your thoughts with that?
Well, there's no doubt that we're better together. And that's one of the things that has helped us be successful in recent history, recent weeks, months, and years here in the state of Indiana, and all of our history. When we go back in this country, we're better together, where we're talking about people of African American descent working together, where we're talking about Black and brown people working together, whether we're talking about Black, brown, and white people working together, because there's always been, as we call, good white folk who help to support us in our efforts. So those who understand that we cannot tolerate this kind of injustice and who will not stand idly by and watch us go backwards, all need to be working together. And when we work together, we have some amazing outcomes. You know, how beautiful it is when brothers dwell together in unity. And so we want to continue to encourage that, and help people understand the different ways that they can engage in this legislative process. Help people to understand in some very practical ways that they can lift up their voice, lend their voice to this movement, to opposition to not only House Bill 1134, but other bills, other legislation that is not good for our community. And again, if it's not good for the African American community, it's not good for any of our communities. And so we want to make sure that we teach people how to fight back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Pastor Reynolds, one of the struggles we've been having, as I know you're working with the ministerial, um, and of course, there's local pastors here in the city, and there's different areas of interest that comes up. Of course, uh, I know somewhat of your mantra where it talks about you're the vanguard of, widows and children and things of that nature. And when you see legislation that comes up against people, not only people of color, but of course people that are poor, maybe some who may not be political savvy and whatnot. Um, One of the ways I see us fighting is constantly saying what we do not want, and I'm in agreement with that. I'm not diminishing uh, anything that we do, because obviously this type of legislation was going to hurt us. And then, of course, there's been other bills and other legislation that have come down the pike to hurt us. But what I'm hoping is that we could collaborate and work together, and not only just talk about what we don't want, but also center in on um, some of the things that we can do collaboratively together. I don't know if you know it, but we created a 501c4, which is a group called the National Political Network. And what that network is looking to do is to bring all faith based people together, so that we're figuring out how can we lobby our own laws, how can we get behind candidates, because obviously you over the years you have developed some great rapport with some of our legislators, just because of your involvement. Those relationships are of course something that we find just developing out because of like passions and legislations that that we all agree on. um, but this group, the National Political Network, what we hope to do with Marion County is for the different candidates that we align ourselves with, that we find a way to support them, not only just with legislation that affects us, but also legislations that we find a common interest in, uh, that's positive for us, as well as being able to make contributions to candidates that we feel kind of line up with our interests, as well as getting candidates that we believe in, um, that we support. And so we're hoping some kind of way that we combine our efforts with the ministerial to be able to even send out alerts when it's time to vote, because at the end of the day, it's one thing on fighting that bill once it gets in the House and the Senate, et cetera. It's another thing on us talking before the bill even comes to the floor, and seeing, what can we do. But yeah, this House Bill 1134, I'm hearing is really. I haven't had a chance to really like dive deep into it, because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. Um, but I believe it's on your page. Am I correct?
There's information about it on the ministerium's Facebook page. I'm not certain that the entire bill is on the page, Again, it's been a living document, and again, we're grateful for the amendments that have been made, because it reveals, and I must admit I was pleasantly surprised when I spent time at the State House last week for the hearing of this bill, and where different amendments were being presented. I was pleasantly surprised about the adjustments that were made, and give evidence and indication that they are responding, they are listening to a degree. We still believe the whole bill should be done away with, but they have made some significant changes. And again, that is the result of people from a wide spectrum of positions in our community, in our state, reaching out and expressing opposition to this bill in a strategic way, in a comprehensive way, and in a way that demonstrates unity in diversity. Because this bill not only has impacted, or has the potential to negatively impact students of color and communities of color, but it brings teachers unnecessarily into the direct line of fire of extreme right-wing parents, right? It literally encourages parents to be litigious and to pursue lawsuits against teachers. And so, this type of legislation right here, in a very real way, has the potential to drive teachers out of the state of Indiana. There's no state in the country that can deal with losing more teachers. We've already been dealing with a teacher shortage, but this type of legislation is leading to teachers retiring early, and other teachers moving out of the state. Those who have gone to school to become teachers, recognizing that they don't want to be teachers in the state of Indiana. These are part of the testimony that I was witness to last week about the way it impacts teachers and threatens their ability to teach without having to be concerned about some extreme parent who's been encouraged to be litigious coming after them with lawsuits. But I want to back up, Antonio. You said something that put a smile on my face as you began to speak earlier, which I think is so very important to this political process. I'm still relatively new to being engaged in the political arena, but in the short time that I have been engaged, I have learned something about a 501c4, which is different than a 501c3. And I'm so glad to know that you and others have come together and formed this new 501c4, the National Political Network, which is a nonprofit whose focus is on getting involved and engaged in the political process. And so, I want to applaud your effort. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. You're about making things happen. A lot of people do a lot of talking. And of course, nobody's going to agree with everybody and everything anybody does. But I admire and always have how you make things happen. And this is an important step in the process of us learning how to come together and become more savvy politically, right? Being able to combine resources, financial resources, people resources, so that we can operate in ways that are strategic and more savvy in this political arena. And that is a significant step for us. As I think about that, I also think about, again, the magnitude of what was accomplished by the leaders of the civil rights movement. They understood the significance of leaving a legal legacy. When they formed the NAACP, back in the early 1900s, it amazes me how clear they were about where the battle needed to be fought. And again, as you study history, I'm sure that they were influenced by everything that was reversed after Reconstruction. They saw what happened, right, when laws were so easily changed, and they understood that if you're going to fight for political power and influence, if you're going to be able to fight for what is right and fight against injustice, you have to include the law in the process. because without having legislation on your side, you really don't have any leverage to make people do right. We know that you can't legislate uh, uh, morality, but you do have to legislate what is right, because otherwise people, so many people have no incentive to do what is right. And so it's our turn to build on the legal legacy that was afforded to us by our ancestors, who again started the NAACP, were engaged in the civil rights movement, who saw major legislation passed successfully, that enables us to live the lives that we live today. But the fight continues, and so now it's our turn to leave a legal legacy. And I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. I'm certain that there won't be any problem with the Indianapolis Ministerium working in partnership with you. And I'm even more certain that more of our alliances in the city, pastoral alliances in the city, and other grassroots alliances in the city, who are growing again in our political savvy, will connect with the national political network and help to get some things done. I'm so glad to hear that you're making that happen. Thank you for doing that on behalf of our city.
Oh, Pastor Reynolds, it's our pleasure. One of the things I see has happened in relations to the faith-based movement, um, COVID changed a lot of things. So on one hand, we were worshiping in congregations and we were going about churches normal. But then when the pandemic happened, then it cleared those benches, it cleared those chairs. Those who were singing and praising the Lord could no longer come into the building. And that forced us to have to get out of our comfort zones and get on mediums such as like Facebook and YouTube and etc. to try to continue to get the gospel out. And in return, we have been able to reach a lot more people because we decided to do church differently. And when you look at that as a prerequisite, I think that that is the same type of mentality we should have when it comes to our political tools, that we begin to use, of course, the social media, the apps, the media platforms that is exposed to us so that we can better inform voters. Because I know that I remember us talking a while ago, and I think that was one of your main concerns was that we do more than just fight. And I heard that. I just want you to know, I heard that, and I said, well, what is it that we can do that would put us in a position where we're working collaboratively together on legislation such as education? Because I know with this bill, education, that really kind of hits you home when it comes to the effort of education and how important it is to you and the ministerium. I know that you guys work with children. I think you have a mentoring program. Um, Now, if this type of bill goes through to where you're not able to share, history of slavery and things of that nature, how do you think that would affect, your mentoring and things that you do?
Well, that's a great question. Again, in its original state, before any amendments were made, House Bill 1134 would have really made our entire curriculum illegal to even teach. Our curriculum is a character building curriculum, but we have developed it in such a way that we celebrate historical figures, famous African Americans, and the different contributions that they have made over time. And it's impossible to talk about what was happening in the life of Marcus Garvey without talking about what was happening politically and socially at the same time. it's impossible to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. again without talking about what was happening politically and socially at the same time, or even many of the women that we talk about. It's impossible to celebrate Harriet Tubman without talking about what was happening socially and politically at the same time. And in recent years, we have added social emotional learning to our curriculum as well. And so everything that we're about, the tools that we use to help uplift and empower our students, to engage them in critical thinking, would be illegal under the original House Bill 1134. And so it is, make no mistake about it, an intentional and strategic attack against the empowerment of our people. In its origin, it is a completely racist legislation, again, that was seeking to turn back the hands of time and to wipe away the things that are known to help empower and equip our people to be all that they can be, and to overcome all the obstacles that we face and that our children face today.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor Reynolds. I think we do have a caller. This been holding for a while. We still have the caller. Go ahead with your call.
Hello.
Hey, Larry, how's it going? Can you hear me, Larry?
Hello.
Larry, can you hear me?
Just fine, Anthony. Can you hear me?
I can hear you so very well, sir.
Yeah, I can hear you on the radio, but not on my phone.
Okay.
But I'm on the air, I know it. But this what's happening with this guy. Here's what's happening, Anthony, with this guy. They're supporting the gay agenda. I've been over there for every hearing on that bill, and 99% of the people are gay with their rainbow face mask on. He's over there trying to, when he says social emotional learning, he's trying to set it up so that the homosexuals.
Wait a minute, Larry. I cannot even allow you to finish. You are being completely wrong about who I am. I'm not doing any such thing as that.
Because this is nothing but filthiness that they only support abortion and homosexuality, two sets of cultures that don't produce anything. So I rebuke him in the name of the Lord, and he needs to stay away from over the State House because he knows nothing about what's going on over there. And those white legislators are looking at him like he's a fool. Just look at who's supporting this. J.D. Ford, a white senator that happens to be gay. All they're doing, when you're a black businessman, the gay people are trying to get classified as a minority so they can come in, Anthony, and bid against you on contracts and get it because they're JLBTQ or whatever, and he's going along with that. So if you don't know what you're doing, you need to stay out of the park, buddy, because you're doing nothing but embarrassing your people right now. Thanks, Antonio.
Okay. Well, I tell you, wow, Larry, if you don't mind, let's bring Pastor Reynolds back on the camera with me. Me and my producer is working together. We're trying to get this thing together. Now, one thing I learned from Dr. Brown, Pastor Reynolds, Dr. Brown comes on our show, and Larry comes on, and Larry has his say against Dr. Brown, and Dr. Brown really doesn't feed into it. He really kind of just, gives Larry what, trying to find some truth in what Larry is saying instead of attacking back, which I'm from the streets, so I'm normally when somebody hit me, my goal is to hit them back.
I'm not gonna attack back. But what I will say is he doesn't know anything about me. And there's nothing true that he just said about me, period. I don't even know how he could draw those conclusions. So
Mhm.
Larry is Larry. Anybody that ever listens to the radio and hears a talk show knows that Larry is just Larry, and I'll leave it at that. I know who I am, and I know everything that he said about me is utter foolishness and inconsistent with who I am. He doesn't know anything about me.
Well, thank you, Pastor Reynolds, for clearing that up. I want to ask a question, though, in relations to what he's talking about. Not you, because I don't like when he attacks people. That's not what our show is about. However, I would ask, is anything in that bill that deals with homosexuality? I thought it was dealing with race. Is
But
that, does that,
but then um, my initial thought is to not even respond to anything that he said. But in light of what you did bring up, again, the bill says nothing about that. Bill doesn't
that's what I
address that at
was,
all. Doesn't address it at all. He's very misinformed. Very
okay.
misinformed.
All right. We just definitely wanted to clear that up. We do got a new producer on the other end. I was hitting cut, but it wouldn't. We just couldn't get it through faster because we do want to make sure we report uh, good information, and I don't think that was good information from Larry. Sometimes he gives us some great information, and then sometimes he does what he does. So, but we do take callers. You said you wanted to take a caller, so. Um, do we leave it up for any other callers who want to call in, Pastor Reynolds, and learn about what's going on, or do we just continue to talk?
People call in and they want to share something. I'm not opposed to that. Uh, he's one of a kind for sure.
Absolutely. So, getting back focus on um, what's needed. I know that what I would love to do is plan a trip to DC, Washington, DC. We get together, look at the landscape of DC, learn, because I'm learning like you, Pastor Reynolds. I'm not gonna say I'm not, man. I'm still trying to, get some things down. But just getting that experience in DC and maybe trying to trying to find one of them street vendors that might sell some of them beef hot dogs and onions and whatnot, and just just kind of learn, that environment. And I'm quite sure there's a lot that goes on in DC that we are not aware of, you know, that I would just love to be able to just enjoy learning from that experience. So I think sometime in April, we're going to be taking a group to DC just to check it out and see how things are going. But getting back to the State House situation, there was a vote today, right, on that bill, House Bill 1134.
I know there was potential for it to happen today or tomorrow, um, but I wasn't following it that closely today, just in the midst of doing other things. So I'm not certain that a vote actually happened today.
Okay, well, we're going to try to figure that out. Now, what will be the next step for us as we come alongside the ministerium to be a support and help? What can we do to help support in relations to tearing down this bill that's trying to be so dangerous against our community?
Well, when it comes to this bill or any bill, and I want to come back to something you said earlier too, after I address this. But when it comes to this bill or any bill, um, really, again, collaboration, collective effort. Again, our people praying. We've been able to be successful in opposing legislation in the past, but prayer was always a part of that. And in addition to prayer, some of the strategies that have worked and given people an opportunity to participate in addition to praying is by providing the names and telephone numbers and email addresses of senators and state representatives and beginning to bombard them with messages telephone messages, email messages, and letters expressing and articulating our opposition to these bills, and providing information, because it's amazing the levels of ignorance that are so prevalent as relates to many of the bills that are being passed. And so these strategies have worked, showing up at the State House when these bills are being heard, showing up to some of the special committees that are behind the scenes. All of these things make a difference. And these are things that any and everybody can do. And I can't imagine what's easier to do than sending an email. And in many instances, as with this bill, we provide information. Our partners provide information. We work closely with CPLI, the Children's Policy and Law Initiative. We work closely with Faith in Indiana and some other organizations that are very strategic in organizing opposition. And so those are some things that have worked and that any and everybody can do. And we really have to really set our calendars to be ready for the legislative session. We've got to be ready for this time of the year and understand it's got to be part of our routine. And we can't simply wait. You alluded to this earlier as well. We can't simply wait until the legislative session to fight some of these bad bills. We have to fight them all year long. We have to stay on top of it all year long. That's why it's so important to work with partners, because people have different gifts. They have different levels of influence. They have different amounts of time they can attribute to this. And so it's really teamwork that makes the dream work. But anybody can make a phone call, and anybody can send a letter or an email, and those things are incredibly effective.
Absolutely. You're listening to Community Church Broadcast. I'm your host, Antonio Lipscomb, and I have with me Pastor Richard A. Reynolds, who's actually doing a lot of great work politically on our behalf. He's working to make sure when there's bills that hurt widow and children that's being written in the great state of Indiana, that he has partnered, the ministerial has partnered with different collaborative groups to fight against issues that will harm our community. And you're right, Pastor Reynolds, and we're taking callers as well, 317-239-1310. One thing about it, Pastor Reynolds, what I'm excited about is being able to not only just fight things down, but also be a part of the process in a way that's helping all of us succeed. Because when you think of education and mentoring, which I know these are items that are agendas that are extremely important to us, there's a lot of resources that are out there that we may not be privy to because we simply are not organized enough to be able to get that, I would say, grant or link to a particular resource and whatnot. So I just wanted to let you know that you're not by yourself, man. I know sometimes it can feel that way, especially with being attacked. Of course, you're going to get attacked. That's just part of the process.
Right,
Jesus,
right. And I'll say this,
yeah.
you've said a lot of things, praising my efforts and things. As I've said, I'm still relatively new at all of this, and but I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve. I must admit, he caught me off guard for a moment. I don't mind being transparent about it, but that's part of my newness to it. I should have seen it coming. I started chuckling when his name came up.
Well, Pastor Reynolds, look at you, man. Time you start getting involved with politics and you start talking about bills. Now, this would say, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. You hear that? And the government shall be upon his shoulders. Jesus is carrying this government on his shoulders. And we are part of Jesus. Jesus doesn't separate us from being a part of him. And so just as much as Jesus is carrying the government upon his shoulder, we have to carry the load with him. We have to, uh, and when you're carrying that load, that's why I say have the mind of Christ, because there's going to be some people that's going to come and smack you upside the head, spit on you, lie on you, call you
Right.
out. You know, they identify you as an individual because you have really taken on and shouldering the caring of the government. And that's the area that a lot of us Christians are totally oblivious to. It used to be a time where the Christian community came together and you couldn't get a political seat unless you came through us first. Uh, you know, that's how it was. And then what would we be looking for? We would be looking at how the person lived their life, the morale. We were looking to see if our agendas lined up with their agendas. Do they care about healthcare? Do they care about reentry? Do they care about the crime that's taking place? Do they care about economics, how they're going to distribute those funds throughout the communities for small businesses? So these are things that we used to do as a faith-based community. We just simply got away from it. It seems as though because we can live in certain areas and we can drive certain cars, go to restaurants, be able to stay in certain hotels, that we've simply become comfortable with that. And even though you say you're new, you've been around for a minute now. That I'm seeing you, because I know within the last 4 years, I think I've seen you, doing work and whatnot on some degree. So that's to be praised, and that's to be appreciated, because quite frankly, Pastor Reynolds, there are some pastors that will never go into the state house. They will never go to a city council meeting. They will never get involved in anything politically, and it's sad, because when you sit in those rooms, you hear so many powerful moves that everybody has to abide by after everything is over with, and then we come to the table saying, "Look at what they doing to me."
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
were you?
yeah, it's definitely time for us to get more involved in the process. Just over the last month or so, um, people had to fill out paperwork in order to run to be on a precinct committee or be a precinct captain. And
Yes,
I
sir.
had somebody come to me and try to encourage me to do that. I didn't think then, and I still don't think now, that was for me to do in particular. But I wish I had known more about it before then, because I do recognize the importance of people of color being in those positions of influence. And so there's just so much to learn, about the political landscape. I was never a political science major, but I've been blessed just to connect with some people that know a little bit more than I do. And we're just working in this together. But I just want to provide some scripture, if that's okay. Because I think it is true. A lot of believers don't understand that this is a part of our mandate. This is a part of what we're called to do as believers. We can't be the salt of the earth and the light of the world if we don't get involved in what's happening politically. And so just some foundational scriptures for me. Again, one that rose, just rose to the top in my mind as I began to deal with and process what was going on with the George Floyd incident. Here, Proverbs 31, verses 8 and 9, the New Living Translation says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. Ensure justice. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice." That's a word of instruction, very clear, unmistakable, a command for those of us who have a voice, a command for those who have a little bit more, who know a little bit more. Again, to whom much is given, much is required. It's a command for us to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves, to fight for justice for those who need justice. And again, that's just some Bible to help support us. Another passage that's been a blessing to me is Psalm 72. Psalm 72 is such a powerful psalm. It's said to be the last psalm written by King David. In fact, it wasn't published by David himself. It was published by Solomon. But it's David's instruction. It's David's prayer for his son Solomon and the kind of king that he wanted his son to be. He prays to God and he says, give your love of justice to the king, O God, and righteousness to the king's son. Help him judge your people in the right way. Let the poor always be treated fairly. May the mountains yield prosperity for all. May the hills be fruitful. Help him to defend the poor, to rescue the children of the needy, and to crush the oppressor. So it's not enough just to rescue those who are being oppressed. He says, crush the oppressor. May they fear you as long as the sun shines, as long as the moon remains in the sky. May the king's rule be refreshing like spring rain or freshly cut grass like the showers that water the earth. And so the bottom line is David was praying that God would make his son Solomon a righteous king who would fight for the needs of the poor. There's so much more in scripture, but those are just the two passages that came to my mind, you know, as you mentioned the fact that many believers are missing this aspect of our responsibility. And again, there are many ways, but one way that we can definitely, again, be the salt of the earth and the light for the world is by engaging in what is happening in our communities, locally and nationally, on a political level, and lifting up our voice and empowering people in any way that we possibly can.
Wow. I tell you what, Pastor Reynolds, that's amazing, man. Everything you just said is amazing and is cutting edge. This is where the Lord is taking the church, and I'm excited about it. You know, of course, we have to be willing to change. I mean, change is not easy for us, but it's necessary. You know, the same hymns that we have sung, the same scriptures we have read, the same people we have ministered to, makes life comfortable for us. But what about when God is calling us to the masses? Then we cannot use the same technique. The Bible does tell us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, and it's very difficult if we're not using those mediums that you just mentioned, you know, the scriptures, and getting platforms out here like the radio and Facebook and YouTube and all these sort of things to share our message. This is going to be something, Pastor Reynolds, that even possibly if me and you are no longer around, your message will still be in the air. And so I know we're kind of approaching a little bit of time leaving us. But I want to say to you this as we conclude our broadcast today. If no one tell you that they're proud of you, whatever that might mean to you, if no one tell you that that you have my high respect and regard to what you see in ministry and the things that God is doing through you, just know that I'm watching and I'm appreciative and I'm thankful. Uh, People don't know when you go down to State House, sometimes you got to pay for parking. not to mention, not to mention, probably going to get something to eat or whatever, and they don't know, you know, what a senior pastor do, how, you know, what our schedules look like, how we're checking in and not checking out, working sometimes 6-7 days a week, so that and underpaid. You know, that's another whole other story. Sometimes not paid at all. We're volunteering just to be able to service to community and service to people of God. So, and then add the political part to our plate as well. I tell you, you have to be a special person to want to undergo those responsibilities, and that's something that I would have to sing your praises and say that you are. And we appreciate you. I know we got about 2 more minutes before we're going to jump off the air. So you go ahead and give last words and anything we can do to support as we move forward. Got about 1 minute to wrap it up.
Well, very quickly, I want to thank you for welcoming me and the Indianapolis Ministerium, of which I'm a founding partner. But I also want to thank you and welcome you to the Indianapolis Urban Pastors Coalition. You joined us for a meeting for the first time last week, and you connected with us. We're excited to have you be a part of it. I just want to acknowledge that because we talk about us working together, and you're demonstrating that you want to work together with other pastors in the community, about you coming out, exploring what was happening with the Indianapolis Urban Pastors Coalition, and then you put your money where your mouth was, and you decided to connect with us, and not only connect your individual self, but the organizations that you are a part of as well. So I'm proud to say that, again, you're putting your money where your mouth is. You don't just talk about it, you do it, you walk it. And so thank you for the leadership that you're providing. And lastly, I just want to say this, because we got to pay attention to what's going on outside of Indiana on a national level. Putin is a hero to Trump. Trump said that Putin is a genius.
Wow.
Putin is who Trump wants to be. What Putin is attempting to do to Ukraine, Trump wants to do right here in America. Pay attention to what's happening over there, because if we're not careful, it'll be happening right here.
Well, thank you so much, sir. We appreciate you coming on, being with us, man. It's always a pleasure. Again, let's reiterate. Let's continue to get down to the State House. Let's continue to hear about these legislation, particularly this bill, House Bill 1134. I think there's going to be another hearing on that March 1st, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've been reading. Let's make sure we fight together. Again, God bless you, Pastor Reynolds. Will always be our prayer. Amen.
God bless you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you as well.
Community Church Indy broadcast. We are on the air each week, Mondays from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. If you would like to contact us, please feel free to email us at info@communitychurchindy.org or call 317-672-7149. Thank you for listening to our broadcast, and have a blessed day.